Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, we join The Mouse Says the Butler Didn't Do It in the next installment of A New Hope Thanksgiving. When last we left the family of Mandula, Jim was standing there explaining to Storm about the relationship with his younger brother, Storm's father, Graham. Only what they didn't know was that the firecracker of the family, Christina, had just walked in and had realized what was being said, with Jim's back turned to her. Their father, Chris, froze where he was, as did Storm and Graham, leaving Storm to wonder by the look on Chrissy's face as to what kind of issues they had just hit on. And Storm knew from Chrissy's daughters and son that their mother had their grandfather's temper. So once again, we join you in the reading of A New Hope Thanksgiving at chapter 49. That's enough! Jim jumped and swung around. Chrissy! Don't you dare Chrissy me, you asshole. You stop it right now, James Connolly Calhoun, or I will kick your ass right here and now, and we'll never make it to behind the auto barn. And you know damn right well I can do it. I've done it before, without LeBou raising a hand. We will fucking roll, and Mandula can replace the furniture in here that I destroy, putting your big-ass, dim-witted body through it. And, Daddy, you're just as bad, letting him go through this shit when you know what Perry said, not to force him. They weren't forcing me, Sissy, Graham defended. Shut up, brat. Graham swallowed and blinked at her. Christina came through the tables around everyone. I've heard enough, Graham. You didn't have to protect me, sweetheart. And you damn sight didn't cause Mom to lose Rainey. I think Dad friggin' missed that statement. That was his ass, the bastard. George Carlson. You now know all you had to do was tell us, but we can't change that now. And we can't change that Reed raped me when I was 17 with a few of his buddies. What we can do is get it out in the open. You did talk to Perry, right? Yes, and we agreed I needed to tell all, but I haven't finished as yet. Okay, but for now, that's enough. She stared into his eyes. You're shaking really bad, and that can cause shit. You need to rest when we're done with this. He gave a nod. Later, between Dad, you and I still need to talk. Good, 'cause yeah, now it's my turn. She looked around the table. That bastard tried something when I was 15. Talk to the sisters, your girls, those that are my age and in our graduating class and in our generation. He almost ate his balls from every last one of us, except for Tammy's dumbass, because Grant was a buddy of his and a drinking friend like Dr. Lowell Berkshire and John Joseph James Lambert of his, and she only listened to her daddy dearest. She turned to stare at Chris. I may not be our father's little baby girl. That was sweet little Ranella Esther's place, and will always be. She deserves that much respect, and all the ribbons, bows, and lace she would have been dressed in, and a baseball cap to let her pigtails stick out from under. And we all love and miss her. but I am our father's daughter, after all. She stepped into her father's private space. Chris actually took a step backwards. Christina didn't go up on her toes. She just went breast to chest with him and stared daggers into his eyes. The man actually took a second step in retreat. Graham whispered to Storm, "Only Mom and she can make him do that. He fears both of them. She is not only his daughter, but Mom is his Redsie, and very scary, and a very scary woman. Sissy takes after her." "Thanks, Dad. I'll remember that." Graham gave a nod. Christina advanced and backed Chris into the table with nowhere for him to go. "I can throw a football in a spiral better than Jim can, bait a hook without flinching, and take out a deer at 50 yards with an arrow. Gut it, clean it, butcher it, save and tan the skin, and turn it into the most delicious venison roast you ever tasted. Thanks to our dad. I was taught, don't get mad, get even, which you all know I'm a bitch, along with being a practicing earth witch, and my element, as is the color of my hair, is no mistake. It's fire." I fixed that band of his, so in class we couldn't find the issue with it. Why it suddenly blew up with no indication that something was going wrong. Even Uncle Silver, as teacher and Ricer, the top in the class of the students, couldn't figure it out. I don't think Hermione could have figured it out even with both Snape's and Dumbledore's help. Yes, I am that much of a bitch, and I am that damn good in mechanics. Oh, fuck. Chris licked his lips. Christina gave them a nasty, evil smile and turned back to glare up at her father. Chris's eyes shot side to side. "Nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, Daddy. You and me, toe to toe, so listen up. It's amazing how a sweet little innocent girl can be ignored when she's learned from the best, her military-trained daddy, and her being encouraged by her amazing, incredible military uncles from all the services to this United States, and the fact that her grandpas, all of them, reminded her that she can do anything a man can do and give birth and nurse that baby when they can't." She crossed her arms over her breast. Even with a cast on her left foot, she can be as quiet as a mouse, slip into a car borne by climbing a rose arbor to the loft, use her gymnastic training to drop down via a rope she tied to the hay stall, draining the oil, only leaving a half quart, and disconnecting the idiot light in the dash, as he always left everything he owned or had access to unlocked, because he continued to lose the damn keys in drunken stupors. I removed the evidence to climb a rope like a friggin' monkey girl, her daddy nicknamed her, and to be back in her bed only to be caught by her 9-year-old little brother because he had a bad dream. She turned and walked back to her baby brother. "I was safe, sweetheart, even after the rape at 17. But I didn't know you weren't. And you," she whirled to Jim, "knock off the good cop, bad cop bullshit. It don't fit you, and damn sight don't fit Richie before Cricket kicks his ass as well." She poked him in the chest. He stood his ground. That bastard threatened all of us in Graham's world. If anyone deserved to die, it was him, not the other three. Christina looked at Storm. I appear, as it seems, that I am your bitchy witchy Aunt Chrissy, who your poor, wonderful Uncle LeBoo got stuck with. This big lug, she tossed her head, is your Uncle Jimmy and is an asshole at times, but still a good guy. He gives you a hard time, let me know. I'll roll with him, and this special man is going to be the most wonderful father and dad anyone could ever have. She wrapped her arms around her younger brother and kissed his bearded cheek. Mandula, little brother. Christina turned and slapped Jim in the chest and shook out her hand. Ouch! It was hard enough that it forced Jim to take 2 steps back at the blow. Ow! Hey, that hurts, Chrissy. Screw you. It didn't do me any good either. Mandula, big guy. Mandula, you 2 little brats. Jim threw his arm over Christina's shoulder and held out the other. Graham stepped into it and brought Storm with him. Storm, we're very glad your poor Uncle LeBoo took this crazy, scary lady off of our hands. Jim smiled. As he did, he looked to LeBoo, who gave a thumbs up. Then his smile dropped. His chiseled looks froze. When he told us he was gay and came out, it was the second time he came home from the hospital, a week after he was almost stabbed to death protecting Chrissy and an unborn Devon. It didn't matter. Never did. It never would. Storm, they were who purchased him his wheels. Worked on it to get it running, taught him to drive so the papa could take him for his driver's test, and my beautiful Christy registered him for Pensbury. She, at that time, lived with our oldest daughter, Pearly Pearl, in Washington's Crossing. I did not have the privilege of being part of their lives as yet. She had not met me. This one. LeBoo bowed to Graham. He introduced us over the summer when she wanted to beautify the gardens of her poorly taken care of old historical home. The Christmas after Devo and yourself were born, the family was on the early Christmas tree hunt, and Graham, he asked me to be their guide. Then, as he saw us together, and I pick up the Pearly Pearl when she tripped and kissed her boo-boo to make better, he suggested I inquire if the mama would like to take the children to a movie and dinner. I was taken by total surprise when this beautiful, brilliant lady, but fierce, she said yes. I am very happy after 13 years of marriage, and many more to come. So, kiddo, I moved in with Chrissy and her 2, at the time, rugrats, so I could have a fresh start and be away from all the bullshit in school. Mike, Billy, Reggie, and some of the other asses that, well, you know, I wasn't sure who I could trust. I started over at a new school. That's why he didn't do anything until you came back to work, right? Storm looked at them. Oh, he showed up there one day at Chrissy's, but Aunt Bet had stopped in to see if I wanted to work at the state park, as there was an opening for after-school employment. I told her yes because, as you know, history fascinates me, and she took me to fill out the application. Then she mentioned it at a gathering that she saw him at Chrissy's house and couldn't understand why he would have been there. And Ranella blew a gasket, Bet said. I remember that. That led to George getting an apartment for the rest of his days in Washington's Crossing because he was bounced by Miss Pinky from her building for some reason here in New Hope. He was still maintaining it when he died, and as Grandpa told you, he was living there full time. Chris pulled out a chair to sit and dropped his head. Dad? Graham approached and leaned down. Are you all right? It's not your blood pressure, is it? Chris lifted his head. His ice blue eyes were misted with tears. I'm okay. Someone needs to call Caleb or Garble to tell them about the storage unit in Vineland and get them down here with anyone they can, because I guarantee there are more than one storage units in the town, outlying areas and along the pine bearings, and they are going to need to check each and every one and find out where the locker is located at before Philly pulls something. And now that the Buffinator is there with her, there's going to be shit that gets pulled, and anything can happen there. If Phyllis Berkshire is anything like her mother, Coraletta Buffy Maytag Berkshire, and it sounds like she is, she's probably got hold of a second key, 'cause they come in pairs, and she can't keep her mouth shut about anything like Buffy. They both tend to have a bragging streak. And if it comes to screwing anyone over, you find her right along with perfection and excellence, Carl. Ha! How about that shit? He looked at Jess. I remember that bitch's name. I'm not going senile after all. I feel so sorry for Dan and Ari as they had to put up with that shit. Sonny, Mac, never got the chance, but thank you for taking on them two kids. The front door of the inn opened and closed. Who the hell? Chris stood to lean around the people. Tell it true like I know you do, Uncle Chris. Jess smiled. If there was a way to fuck up someone's life and give them their jollies in the process, just leave it to Dan's birth family to do that. Lightfoot would agree. Chapter 50. Chris stood staring at the young woman, teen girl, and little boy who stood there at the archway of the dining room. Not as bad as my effed up family can butcher someone's life. Tootie all but sobbed as she held on to her little brother Buddy with her younger sister RCC and leaned against the open door of the dining hall. I'm so sorry, Storm and Graham. I just told Thurston W. Von Tort I never want to see his ass again, and I don't want to ever deal with Philly. I need help to deal with gaining custody of these two. I keep getting told I'm too young to gain it by lawyers. They are not going back into that house with that wicked bitch. I will not allow it. He has welts from one of her boyfriends, and look at this. She pushed up RCC's right sleeve of her thin winter coat to reveal several fresh, jagged, open wounds from the girl's mid-arm to her elbow. I'll get the first aid kit. Bet bolted. Medic, get your ass over here. Silver shouted at Chris as he grabbed the napkins to cover the wounds in the attempt to stop some of the fresh bleeding. Chris grabbed a water pitcher to bolt to the girl and dumped it over RCC's arm. We'll worry about the damn floor later. Get her coat off and let me see this damage. Silver helped to remove her jacket as the girl danced around. Owie, 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 owie. I'm sorry, sweetie, but we need to clean this, and Rain ain't here. Shit, what happened? She knocked the knife Phyllis was using to cut up vegetables onto the floor as she was told to get the sage jar. I wasn't in the kitchen, but I was just told about it by her, and she just showed me these wounds. This was her punishment for picking it up and putting it back instead of in the sink. Tootie wrapped her arm around her younger sister. I want the baby she's pregnant with as well. It's, I think, RCC and Buddy. It was conceived through IVF from someplace. And guess who the guy she's dating is? It's fucking Reed. The disabled girl scrunched her face up and danced as she sucked her other thumb. Said I sorry. Chris pulled her to his chest, cupped the back of her head. Shush, sweetie. Jim, call someone. Have her ass charged before I go into a hunt. On it, Dad. He pulled out his phone and dialed to step away from those that were gathered. Bet appeared and opened the first aid kit. I just found out she's still fucking Reed when he and that blonde with the kids showed up as we were taking off. I just called the real estate agent in Bristol. I'm selling my home in the historical district and moving away so we can't hurt any of you ever again. Graham looked at Storm. Go, Dad. They need you. I'm okay. I'll stand. Graham walked around through the table. He took Tootie into his arms and placed one hand around RCC. Calm down. You're all safe here. Let's get you a cup of tea. All of you need to eat, and Aunt Liliana wants you to stay with her and her puppies. Come on. He led them to the table to take a seat. Chris tended RCC's wound as she reached over, and the large dog, Coco, laid her head in the child's lap. I want photos of this. Dakota held his phone in place and snapped away. Buddy, I want to view those welts. The boy pushed up his thick glasses and lifted his shirt. Jesus Christ almighty! Hap was on his feet with his phone. The whelps wrapped around, almost completely around the boy's thin body. In him being so thin, they could count the ribs that showed. One left an open wound an inch below his left nipple. That shit was Thurston W. and Paulie. I have no excuse for what happened at my house with them two. I'm sorry, Storm. I've been racking my brain. When I try to concentrate on things, I get a wicked headache like I was drinking. But I don't drink. Not at all, Liliana's computerized voice spoke. She never has, and that's because of Phyllis. Storm cocked his head to one side and looked at his father, then to her. Did you leave a drink unattended or, walk away from it at any time with them two being there? She stiffened. I set my soda down. Daddy called to remind me to pick you up. Yeah, I set it on the end table and left the room to take the call in private. I never trusted Paulie when it came to Daddy Iceberg or any of my aunties. Now I know I was right, and it's my fault they're gone. And the kids, oh, the kids! Graham looked to Dakota. Sounds familiar. Did you notice if your drink was in a different place when you came back into the room? She bit her lip. Thurston W. He brought it to me after he put ice into it and had poured more Dr. T into my glass. Dakota looked at Jim, then to Richie. Too much so, Graham. Tootie, when you called Storm at the motel, what was going on? They were trying to get me to go to bed. Oh, God. Liliana held open her arms for Buddy to go to her. He walked over for Peggy to make up a plate and bring it to him. Ethel came to Tootie. Sweetie, who did you wake up with the morning you picked up Storm? Tootie burst into the tears she had been trying to hold back and hid her face in both hands. Both of them. Oh, my God. And you have no memory. Graham set down the hot cup of tea for her. Tootie dropped her head and sobbed. Chris looked at Silver. This needs a hell of a lot of stitches, and the lidocaine may not cut through the haze of the pain. Do you got anything herb-wise you can make a pack of to use to numb so we can stitch this? Is there anything you can use out of the greenhouse? Let me look. Silver was off like the running back he had been in his youth. Ethel knelt down in front of Tootie. Honey, are you on the pill? She shook her head. Thurston W. said condoms were used. Graham stepped back. I don't trust that bastard, neither one of them, as far as I could throw the in. Tootie, come with me. Chrissy stepped in to take her hand and help her from the seat, and led her from the hall. 10 minutes later, they returned. Silver was laying boiled and cooled leaves over RCC's wound, and as they waited for the effect to take place of the numbing. Chrissy tossed an EPT on the table with a pink line and crossed her arms over her chest. She's about 8 weeks along, Chrissy announced. Date rape drug. Gotta be. I'll get Garble and Caleb on the story unit. But Bristol is not our jurisdiction on this, but we're taking it. I'm issuing an arrest warrant for Thurston W. Von Torp for date rape, and Polly Von Torp is being paged to and charged with the same. I'm on it. Jim, Richie, let's do this. Dakota and his men left the hall. Holy fuck, Storm whispered. Sweetheart, with the shit the Supreme Courts have reversed. Emily took Tootie's hand. No, it's a baby. It has a right to live. I'm just going to have to wait until he or she is born. Then you will sue the shit out of whoever fathered this child for child support and take their asses to the cleaner and demand that they are never to have contact with the child. LeBeau folded his arms. Papa, how is the girl child's arm? The huge Ugandan stepped forward to tower over everyone. I'm able to stitch it and it's going to leave a nasty-ass scar. This is not one swipe, but it's been done multiple times to cause this much damage. Chris clenched his teeth as he performed the intricate work. I wish Rain, Jonathan, or Danny were here. Fuck me. Storm, give me your glasses. I need to lean in here and get a better look at this. The smaller the stitch, the less scarring she'll have. Storm took his trifocals off to pass to his quarterback. Chris put them on, blinked several times to focus, and leaned down to begin to stitch the child's arm. "I'm calling Russia and getting the kids in to be examined and this documented." Ethel stood and took her phone. "I'll drive them in." Chapter 51. Storm smiled to himself. A couple hours later, he sat in the private sitting room with the dogs. Lady Lobo laid on the comforter, while Lucky and Free snuggled in the wicker laundry basket near the fire, and 4 of the B&B's 7 king cats, with a now slightly calmed down but still very upset Tootie, sat and watched what they had on the TV. In the distance of the computer room across the way, they could hear the clicking of keys as Buddy worked on his Thanksgiving project he had planned out for the family. RCC was curled up and wrapped in a warm comforter in his grandparents' suite, with several stuffed animals around her and a soft, natural sound being pumped into the room as Baka and Hajna had taken up guard duty to be the string mops that snuggled with her. They had returned less than a half hour ago from Dr. Azart's, Rasha Farr's, and Cindy Moon's offices. It was confirmed that Tootie was pregnant. The stitches in RCC's arm were looked at, and gratifyingly, Chris was told he had done the best job possible. She was given a tetanus injection and a prescription for antibiotics, which they had filled in an emergency situation. Buddy finally felt comfortable enough to tell his story of what was continuing to go on with the visits from several of Phyllis's boyfriends, including Reed. But mostly he responded to questions from Dr. Azart about statements over Dr. Lowell Berkshire when he and his sisters were visiting their grandparents on their mother's side. There was much more to those stories than even Tootie knew of, and for some reason it seemed like the fireplace continued with the need for more logs to keep the warmth in the room, and there had been a mention of the fact that the furnace appeared to be working overtime and harder than usual to keep up with the encroachment of the cold. That could not be from the hole his grandfather put in the wall in the dining hall, because his dad, Uncle Pat, and Uncle Hut put a board over it, and they did cut and fix the outside clapboards. The lapse and plaster repair would have to wait until the weekend, but still it just seemed to be colder in the inn. Everyone had noticed it and were wearing extra sweaters. There were photo albums on the coffee table where Tommy Kay took up residence, and on the recliner was Stanley, who was still in recovery and being watched and monitored, while 2 photo albums were stacked on the floor by Deary's beanbag, which she rested in, and Carrie was in her usual spot, the coveted hearth with the glowing fire. In his lap was something, a photo album he had not expected, as Tootie looked at another. Storm held his dad's baby album. The one she held was a smaller one of her father's in Reed. It wasn't complete. There were no photos past his 15th birthday. By then, Ranella had just about thrown up her hands. Reed was by then living at an apartment George kept at Pinky's apartment building, and she very seldom saw him. unless he wanted something. That was usually money. They'd taken the time to talk and really get to know each other. They had known each other all their life, but never really had the chance to sit down and talk. Tootie had explained it was she who gave Buddy his nickname. His given name was Randall Palin Smith Jones, the same last name she carried, as did RCC, and she had the idea that they may be, like herself, Reeve's children. However, her mother would never acknowledge who had been their father. The minute RCC had been diagnosed with brain damage she suffered before birth, then Buddy was found to have ADHD at age 2. There came the meds, and he was put into foster care, and RCC had barely escaped being placed in an institution. This was done as it was Iceberg and Twinkle who fought their mother all the way. But none of the three had escaped Lowell and Buffy until Tootie had kidnapped them one day and fled to Iceberg and to the Annies. Storm liked all of them, really liked them, and saw Iceberg's and the Aunties' influences in her, RCC, and on Buddy. The 15-year-old spoke of Iceberg as her chocolate daddy and loved him dearly. Buddy, at 10, talked about the man, teaching him about baseball, football, and basketball, and setting up a basketball hoop in the tiny backyard for them to shoot hoops when Tootie would bring them down on weekends, and finally to stay. Tootie told him she had to explain about heaven, and that Daddy Iceberg and the Aunties now had wings and halos. Storm talked all three with Ethel and Emily to inform them that they were in the works of getting the children settled with family members who had their foster care licenses and already wanted to give the children lifelong homes. Twinkle's daughter, Ursula, was now stable in the hospital, and when released, she would be handling her father's estate, and there was a place for her and her children as well here in New Hope. She really did care and had made the decision after talking to the Mandula family that she would take over as part of the family and step into footsteps to help out the Mandula Foundation. As for Tootie, she was indeed selling her house in Bristol. At one time, she was planning on doing this to move in with Thurston W., but now her plans were changing. She made the decision that when she sold the home for what she could, it would go into the Mandula Foundation to help with the settling of her auntie's children. When she set about leaving school to go away, however, there was hell to pay over that, and Mandula had been the one to raise it. They slammed the door on that idea. She would continue with her studies as an agricultural engineer and landscape designer and artist at Penn State University, and do part-time work on the land of the inn with PayPal. Sydney. Along with this, she would continue to work for the Botanical Gardens of Philadelphia in the different areas of the gardens that they owned, and study with LeBou's family during the summer at the nursery and tree farm. A cottage would be open to her and the children for a residence. After Thanksgiving, they would rent several moving trucks and pack up her home and her belongings of her aunties and the children, and Iceberg's home with Twink's help. All of those items would be set up and stored somewhere on the property. And as one, the family would help her to gain sole custody of RCC and Buddy. Iceberg's mother, Miss Ona, now in her 80s, had reached out to Chris and Silver. As it turned out, there were 12 row homes in the block that Iceberg owned, including his own. They were his cribs for a stable. Twinkle managed them for him, and now that he was gone, those that chose to had vacated the premises. Others, Twinkle had found apartments in the neighborhood, helped with filing for Section 8 housing, economic assistance, medical, and even mental health care, gotten them into halfway houses and rehab facilities, and even into women's shelters if they needed protection from former pimps or boyfriends. Several she'd gotten their disability paper to go through for them. Twink was the only one who stayed with her own 3 children. Now she was helping to inventory what was there and should be stored or sold to help the foundation care for the other 4 women's children. As Miss Ona now lived in an assisted living facility, everything that Iceberg owned was now left in the care of the Mandula Foundation. They would now have to deal with the removal of private and personal property and placing the homes on the real estate market. As the 2 men had been contacted this morning, all Twinkle had asked for was could she apply with the inn for a housekeeping or a maid position, so she would have employment. She also had years of bookkeeping skills with Iceberg that she would offer to the foundation. Skeeter jumped at the opportunity when she was emailed Twink's resume. Twinkle was hired on the spot as her assistant in not only the bookkeeping of the inn and other businesses owned by the members of the foundation, but other businesses throughout New Hope, Yardley, Washington's Crossing, Levittown, and even Philadelphia and Trenton that Skeeter was a CPA for. The family agreed that there would be a place for Twinkle and her children with them, which included a nanny position for Ursula as she was pursuing child development and socialization along with child psychology. As it turned out at Princeton University during night courses to help with RCC and Buddy after school, and the fact that she knew each and every child in the family who was going to be adopted into their new homes. This would be a great help for the children to know someone there with her, Tootie, RCC, and Buddy, especially with the children that were special needs that would be coming into the family. Plus, an added factor was to their advantage with Ursula and Twinkle as well as Tootie, as they always taken care of those children, and now Tootie would need help as she continued her schooling and would come on staff to train and learn from Papaw Sidney. It was agreed on, although that took some convincing with Tootie, as she was possibly Ranella's granddaughter and carrying the next generation, that she should be on the family's land. The same went for the other 2 children, as they as well were probably Reeds, and would be safer for her and the family with Twinkle's knowledge, in that she could help her raise her child and the other two. Twinkle was now making the funeral arrangements, and the family made the decision that as this would be the children's homes, their mother and the man they called Daddy would be laid to rest in the family cemetery, with all the respect paid to them that was due, as he was a decorated vet, and they'd brought Storm home to them. The other albums were of the family of Mandula as children from the 60s through the 70s and into their high school years of the 80s, on with the next generation of their children, and even into the last few months. Chapter 52. The two of them were still going through the photo albums as they discovered a picture of the gathered men in various uniforms of the armed forces and their wives with several of their children and the Papadopoulos family. Each of the men had served in the military and gone to college or university on the GI Bill, and there were several photos of Iceberg and his mother. Iceberg, Dad Silver, and Grandpa Chris were Marines. They served together right out of high school. Silver for the same 12 years as Chris. Iceberg served for 16, although he'd never attended school a day in his life. All three had been wounded in the service of their country. Iceberg went in before they graduated from high school, where they joined directly after graduation. They'd all served in El Salvador and were recipients of Purple Hearts. His grandpa was awarded the Medal of Valor and was the recipient of an award from the country of El Salvador, the Gold Cross of War Heroism in Action, and the civilian's highest award of the Golden Medallion for his pursuit of the investigation into the murder of the Jesuit priest in the 1980s in the country, and the call for the military and those responsible for the murders to stand trial in the World Court. However, the new democratic government of El Salvador was never happy with this, but the people were, and they'd all three been honored in 1995 for their work towards peace, after they spent several years in the reserves. So, what had happened with Iceberg? Why had he turned out so different than Dad Silver and Grandpa? Storm wondered to himself. He was told the answer by Miss Ona. A woman, child. He couldn't save her from her demons of drugs, and found her dead in the back alleyway after spending 2 weeks looking for her, and then her autopsy was done. It showed she was pregnant. The child was his, and would have been his son, and she was Twinkle's mother. Yes, Twinkle is his daughter. He took custody within days of finding her mother. He vowed never on his watch ever again. That was in 1992. She sighed. It would have been my second, but not only grandchild. It was to be his son. I claim those who include his Tootie, sweet little RCC, and Buddy as my grandbabies. These are now the children that all have homes in Mandula, so I can rest in peace when I'm called home myself. I have been informed by your Alice that they will start to arrive on Tuesday. We did it together. Mandula did it. May you all be blessed. The other men were in several different branches. Tootie and he had talked as they looked through the albums that sat about them. Their uncles, Happy, Pat, and Hut, were Air Force. All three had pilot's license and had graduated classes of 80 through 82, and they flew bombing missions over Iraq in the first Gulf War and did air shows with a B-17 bomber known as a flying fortress that Mandela Foundation had found and fully restored. Her name was the Ranella Polar. They were teaching two 15-year-old girls, Lenny Bloomington and Bern Almontoff, how to fly that bird. By springtime, the young ladies would have their own pilot's license. The DVD they just took from the shelf and started watching had been recorded as it was broadcasted in the week before Halloween of this year and was also unexpected. Uncle Mac was the class of 1981 and was Navy for almost 37 years. As a lieutenant commander and head of a SEAL team, he had been on board a nuclear submarine, the USS Nathan Green, stationed in the South Pacific, in Japan on the USS Chief, a mine countermeasure ship, then on a destroyer, the USS Allwright Burke, and then in the Philippines. Also, he'd been on Commander's Watch, where they had a standoff with North Korea and China during military games. He served on the battleship in the Persian Gulf in the First Gulf War. He was injured on the USS Cole when she'd been attacked by Osama bin Laden's suicide bombers on October 12th of 2000 in Yemen, and tried to save Mama Licorice's husband, Gabe Applegate, and almost lost his own life. He'd been one of the servicemen to report the sighting of a Tic Tac off of the side of a ship when he was stationed in San Diego and faced the ridicule of the Pentagon when it was reported. Now, it turned out, he was proven to be right, and they were regretting it. While home recovering for over a year's time from the bombing of the Cole, he and Aunt Sonny had conceived Stevie after raising Jess and helping Dan and his cousin Ari for 17 years and preparing to send the three of them, plus Jess's girlfriend Zoe, off to their first year of college, while they were in their last year of high school. They'd started all over again at the later age of being in their 30s. At the age of 39, that was him and Aunt Sonny at 38. He couldn't imagine that age with a newborn baby in the house. It must have been hell for them, he thought. Storm and Tootie were both in awe of the man, and yet, unlike their Uncle Jess, Uncle Mac was very quiet. This was until he was pissed off enough. Then all hell broke loose, and it was done with the eloquence of speech. He had been on the debate team in high school, and his team, with him, with his help, had never lost a match. He'd been one of the SEALs chosen for the hunt for bin Laden after the attack on 9/11, although he wasn't involved in the final chapter of the capture. He'd only retired in 2018 and become a civilian contractor and advisor to the Pentagon in the Department of the Navy, along with the civilian contractors assigned to train at the National Academy and at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. He'd been there until the first week of November. Then the lawsuit issued for wrongful arrest, false imprisonment, and civil rights and constitutional right violations had progressed. He'd handed in his resignation in both the Pentagon and the Naval Academy to come home for good after all these long years. However, where this part in his life had begun was that he was outspoken about the way the U.S. had left Afghanistan and the equipment that was left behind, the lives lost, including Uncle Rasputin's and Aunt Somalia's son, Roman, because of a miscalculation of the area by the U.S. Marine Corps of advisors at the Pentagon in the placement of a base on the mountains in Afghanistan, in which the military base was set in an area that could be infiltrated and placed under attack and would be in a situation of poor defense, and the Pentagon knew it even before the area was chosen. They decided against other recommendations that would have been more decisive in the area to defend, and deferred to this placement, knowing it to be vulnerable and the fact that it was a pending failure of defensibility and the elevated count and wounded and the dead of men and women. This included Roman Khrushchev and the injury to Rosie Kugat and Navy SEAL Julius Willows, who was Dr. Jonathan Willows' brother. It would be a proven fact. An Afghanistani soldier would be the deciding factor in Rosie's and Julius's rescue. A young private and translator by the name of Sadim Qatar had waded through the gunfire to get to the wounded in Rosie with the head trauma, and Julius, who laid unconscious from the explosion of the ammo depot, and went back to retrieve the body of their friend and his in Ramon, and had been wounded himself as he gave cover until reserves could get there. The entire defense had been frauded as the Taliban simply swarmed over the mountaintop and attacked as one and of their own had infiltrated the military of the U.S. Yes, the suicide bomber was an American GI. It had taken the Mandula family almost a year after the attack to get the Qatar family out of Afghanistan with the help of the Willows. Sadim and his family were settled in New Hope with his own business, and his son, 8-year-old Dahar, was the first of 5 children to be American-born, and they were legal American citizens and very proud of it. Now it was only being revealed in the attack that took place on Israel on October 7th, a few years earlier, that it was probable that the Taliban was now selling what was left behind by the American armed forces to groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, PIJ, and ISIS, as several American weapons had been found hidden in the radiology department of a hospital in Gaza that had underground tunnels and war rooms of Hamas, with a stockpile of multiple U.S. weapons that had been refurbished. These weapons were now being used to lay threat to the right to exist of Israel by their enemies. Mack had even spoken to Congress the week after the attack, but prior to the interview that was given, which was requested by the VP and several senators and House Representative members after his appearance in Congress, which neither the president or vice president liked of the time. He had called for a full investigation of the Pentagon and the White House practices in the meeting. The VP felt that pressure had been put on them and placed them in a spot they were left unprepared for the outcome. So they wanted the interview to be presented before a live audience, and the questions were to be placed on a prompter for those to be asked to be able to review before they would give their response. In the intern, they were advised that this was never a good idea to go before a live audience in a cold situation. They promptly ignored the advice and came face to face with the questions, leading to their qualifications to follow direct order from the presidency given to the border czar, and then the subsequent attempt to cover the opening back door when an agent assigned to the VP's security squad came before Congress to state the facts involving the actions of that vice president. An attempt to stop him had taken place. Then the orders came down that if he was to present a video that would be a resulting consequence, and a threat to his family had been recorded via a known tap set up by the New Hope Police and the FBI in dealing with the continued threats against his person and that of his family. There had been given orders proven to be sent down from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and the naval base in Annapolis by those staff members to confiscate and destroy the tape in question at any cost. Someone inside had turned the situation over to the FBI. The second situation arose in the attempted retrieval that had taken place and the substantial failure, as several of those assigned were now under arrest on the charges of breaking and entering of a private home located in an area of New Hope, Pennsylvania, at which the home that was broken into was not the home they were ordered to enter, but the residence next door, as in their failure they misread the address. In doing so, the residence they entered through breaking into the garage happened to belong to the chief of police of New Hope itself, and when woken by alert of his dog, he contacted his squad. Dakota, his wife Alice, their two teenage sons Bubba and Chase, and the neighbor Alistair Lee Applegate, whose home they were attempting to break into, held all of them at gunpoint. Upon arrival, they were taken into custody, and at their arraignment, when the judge was presented with their credentials and that their higher-ups attempted to put forth their demands for release, the judge simply denied bond and gave the statement to the press: "I will not tolerate a Watergate situation in my judicial district, and as these men were armed and paramilitary type weapons, this was much more than just a break-in. They were there to murder. They will not be released until they stand in a full-on trial, as they are being charged with multiple felony violations, along with conspiracy to commit murder in order to achieve a direct order from the staff of the President and Vice President of these United States of America. This is not Russia. This is the America, and it is done by constitutional rights that I will not allow a president or a vice president to stomp all over. The men were now serving a sentence so harsh it had never been dealt out in the history of the U.S., and higher-up staff members were sweating as both president and vice president denied knowing anything about what had occurred. They came to a screeching halt with a live congressional hearing and the live interview that took place only weeks prior that involved Mac McMichaels. Chapter 53. Uncle Mac was arrested. Tootie looked at Storm. For free speech? That's unconstitutional. Storm stood to look on the DVD shelves. Dad said there's a recorded video here from the BBC and World Report. There's a lawsuit going on about the arrest. Aunt Sonny took of the federal government and the military. Hold on. He took down the case. I got it. He shuffled over to put it in the player. He pressed play and trudged back to take his seat as it came on. Storm and Tootie were in the process of watching the recorded DVD and the interview. In the weeks prior to the live interview, the man had appearances before Congress and the House of Representatives. Mac condemned them and the presidency in the statement. The way America pulled out is a disgrace in leaving allies of the Afghanistan-American relations to be slaughtered by the so-called new democratic government that turned out to be as crooked as they came and infiltrated with the insurgents of the Taliban leaders. The U.S. military had been sent there to capture, charge, and prosecute as known worldwide terrorists, and yet they now run the damn influential country. A stunning surprise that hit home for him and Tootie both was that their Uncle Mac had been arrested and done an overnight stint of time with the threat of court-martial after the interview by the U.S. Secretary of Defense. After Uncle Mark's resignation as an advisor to the Pentagon and Annapolis, in a direct order from the Pentagon that may have even directly come from the big house on Pennsylvania Avenue, if he did not stop his outspoken criticisms and statements against the military and the president's policies, to which he presented in the interview. Mac's opening statement in the interview with Laurel Parker had the audience and those on the podium sitting in silence as he looked directly into the camera and those watching the live interview from where they were seated. It may do the president and vice president and military of this country good to be reminded of my notice to those in the open public interview and that of my appearance before Congress that I am retired as of 2018 from the United States Navy as a Special Forces member and a lieutenant commander of the U.S. Navy SEAL Team, and was for 4.5 years a civilian contractor who served in Annapolis and the Pentagon as a teacher and advisor, and if this is taken to court, I will fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, as now you are threatening on national TV my civil rights of freedom of speech, thereby provided by the Constitution of the United States of America and my First Amendment rights as an American citizen, duly sworn and signed by the forefathers of the United States of America in the years following the Revolutionary War, with the signatures of the Continental Congress in Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and as it was the first capital of these United States of America. Less than 20 minutes after the statement, he was arrested, leaving the building under those orders. He was suddenly released within 10 hours, and the Pentagon and members of the White House presidential and vice presidential staff were answering questions before Congress and the House of Representatives and the Supreme Court, along with staff members of the Pentagon itself. It seemed no one now knew where the orders had actually come from. And to put a topper on it, Aunt Sonny had several lawyers. They had filed a constitutional lawsuit and demanded an investigation into who had ordered the arrest. Mac's comments were captured on national TV in the interview with PBS and rebroadcasted with Laurel Parker on the BBC and International World News and Report. This was the DVD made of the proceedings that took place in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., to a full house with standing room only left. That had the two of them sitting glued to the sofa and stunned admiration of the man they called Uncle Mac. In the interview where they sat on the altar and the interviewer at the podium, he actually went head-to-head with the VP themselves and the majority leader and minority leader of the Senate, while the government was in a shutdown, with the Secretary of Defense and the representative of the House as that of Pennsylvania's own representative, Donald Von Torp. The Secretary of Defense had admitted later that it was he who had made the threat and assumed that Mac was still part of the military, therefore governed by them. Mac had smiled, and his response was to demand, "Do your worst. I served this country honorably and lost friends and family, so this president, Senate, and House could leave billions of American taxpayers' funding for the equipment this government abandoned and left there, so our young men and women, and now the young warriors of Israel and innocent civilians of God's chosen people, can face our own country's firepower and arms coming at them, wounding, blowing them to kingdom come, and destroying families by the enemies of the war on terror, who are selling the left behind to of this world's supposed greatest country For Christ's sake, we dumped helicopters in the South China Sea and blew up our own tanks, trucks, and aircraft on military bases before we made a panic run out of Saigon in the last days of Vietnam when I was a goddamn child. This time, we left that shit on the roadsides, deserts, and mountaintops for them to simply just pick the hell up. Why? Because of a school teacher wanting to be first lady, backing a senile old bastard who's working for an Islamic-backed idiot. The BP then rose, to which she pointed a finger at them. Listen and listen well, Vice President. I use the term very loosely, VP, and majority and minority leaders, and Rep. Von Torp. Your vice president didn't have the guts to go within 200 miles of the Texas border towns where there are issues when they were sent there by our so-called commander-in-chief, who's usually asleep at the goddamn wheel, our president, after being named border czar, and then by proceeding to accuse the Border Patrol officers of atrocities when they weren't even there, and only looked at photos and a video, which the cameraman who took it stated what was being said was purely fabrication and never happened. Therefore, perjury was committed by them before the Senate and the House through lying through omission, which in several countries and counties is varying states is a common practice by our district and county attorneys. But I would guess she learned that little trick through her husband, who is himself an attorney, as they are, which has damaged your credibility severely, VP, with the people of this nation. Not to mention, there are several families in the San Francisco Bay Area that want to nail your hide to their courthouse wall for the release of illegal immigrants who were convicted criminals who held felony records in both their own countries and here, as well as those families of victims. Some of them now visit their family members in the cemetery because those you released murdered them and are still somewhere roaming this country's streets as you were there as district attorney. One of which is a young journalist who was raped at age 17, beaten and left for dead, only to watch this man murder 6 family members before her, then left, and then he was released when captured to be sent back to his home country. But you abolished ICE, and he fled and was left to murder 3 more people in the following 2 weeks and disappeared. And then when he was found in another home attempting to rape a child and the father blew him away, you chose to charge the father with murder. The VIP's response was sorry, I have no way to say this other than there are regrets. Tell that to her and the other families of the dead and see what their response is to you, especially the child he was in the process of raping, who you decided to prosecute her father for murder, and it took 5 years of her life to get her father released from prison. The VP sat there staring at him. And these people and others who are around this country, these are the ones who are now dealing with the invasions of their towns and homes, invasions by criminal elements, their businesses being burglarized, and women and young girls being terrified to walk their own town streets for fear of what may happen to them. A 12-year-old girl was raped and impregnated by a known criminal released from a Colombian prison to simply climb on a bus issued by the good old US of A and transported to the child's hometown, to which now she is stuck carrying his child to the full term because it is now forbidden to have an abortion for a pregnancy that she conceived during a rape by a man your prior Democratic president left under our borders. And all that is said is, well, he was captured. We're sending him back. Why? Why do you think he wants to be sent back? It's simply so he can come back across the border to rape and possibly murder the next child. VP, I hope the child is that of your granddaughter, because your asses basically said, oh yeah, open our borders. And then after you were confronted by your own Secret Service officer who was testifying before the Senate, you threw out a statement that the man you were supposed to be working with in security to protect your disrespectful butt was a racist. Well, she stuttered and had turned to look at her spokesperson. Explain how it is, VP, that this man, former Secret Service agent Alistair Lee Springfield, my godson, yes, is a racist, as his adopted mother is Native American and Scotch-Irish, and is fully functional and an owner of a well-to-do business, who is disabled from birth and was a throwaway child and told by the state of Pennsylvania she was non-adoptable when several different families wanted her, that she should be put into an institution as an infant because of those disabilities. Yet, she's a college graduate with multiple master's degrees and a professor at our community college. His adopted father was Afro-Polish Jew American, a criminal and family lawyer who was a member of the Philadelphia District Attorney Office before his death. This now retired Secret Service agent's birth mother is Afro-Vietnamese, and we have it on his original birth certificate that his father's name is Saddam Farrakhan. His religious papers state his father was Islamic, and for your information, he was raised in New Hope, Pennsylvania, a community that is accepting of all peoples and is known for its welcome to the LGBTQI plus folks and all religions. His godparents are myself, my wife, who is a descendant of Austrian gypsies who were brought to this country during Hitler's Holocaust by a Catholic nun for their own safety and raised by two Judaic-Christian families who also adopted Jewish and Gypsy children to save their lives from one madman and allowed them to learn and study their background. And you had the audacity to throw out the race card because you chose to bring up the fact that you are an Afro-Asian American who is through our legalities, married to a Jewish lawyer. Oh no, VP. That don't cut it. As a matter of fact, that is pure, unadulterated bullshit when it comes to Alistair. Nor does it cut it with my family and friends and a hell of a lot of American people who are not racist as you appear to be. Nor are they anti-Semitic, nor are they feminist or male chauvinist pigs, and still back Israel at a drop of a hat, but yet respect the Islamic people who want peaceful relationships like our friend Sadim Qatar, who is a proud owner of an ice cream truck that also serves hot drinks and warm pastries throughout our neighborhoods, and that my family and friends helped to get his family out of Afghanistan, where your president and the Congress and Senate left him to be possibly slaughtered by the damn Taliban, as he was one of the forgotten who helped this country and tried to save my other godson's life while they were under attack. This is nothing more than what my father would call a cop-out. He leaned away from the mic and took a drink of water and continued his onslaught in the following statements. And you chose to throw out that cock and bull card whenever you can't get your own little way, like a frickin' 2-year-old having a temper tantrum who should be turned over her daddy's knee and swatted on the bare ass, then stood in a corner and had her politically correct Barbie and G.I. Joe dolls taken off of you and grounded until you and our president grows the hell up. He folded his arms over his chest. The only thing you have that he doesn't is the status quo of money you grew up with. And let me tell you, his mother and sisters had boobs and a uterus. And he'd still be more of a bonded parent than you could ever be, because he gives a shit about all people and not just those who are blind to their ambition. He was raised by his mother, aunts, and sisters that have those God-given items of physiology and was taught to respect a lady, girl, or female infant and not be a goddamned animal like what you're letting into this country. And the woman who raised him would not let any woman use their monthly differences against them or him to allow them to choose to use it as an excuse when they did something stupid or as idiotic as you and our president have. And they themselves can admit when they have screwed up and take the blame like a big girl, because they were raised that they are no different than any male, except that they can give birth and nurse that infant and still turn a wrench, do bookkeeping, or put a rivet in a military aircraft, or teach a child its prayers to whoever the hell they choose to pray to. Get a life, VP, and live it in the real world, so you can get a grip on the idea that if you should throw that out there, your so-called Trump card, whenever the going gets tough, you wimp out that people in the United States of America who are diversified like Alistair Lee Springfield are going to all cut out your bullshit into the open and make you eat that effing card one of these days. If you pull that in front of my wife, an independent business owner who raised our 2 children and fostered 2 on her own while I was serving this damn country, Sonia would slam that bitch right back in your face, as would any of the ladies she calls her sisters. He pointed to the VP. You, Vice Pres, and the way my people's country, a country I fought for 37 years, is being run right now. It sickens me. Max started off stage in the video. Storm, as they watched the DVD of the interview, was blown away. Yes, give him hell, Uncle Mac. Good. Damn good for you, Uncle Mac. Tootie nodded and pumped her fist. Mac had stopped to turn for a final statement. FDR, Truman, Eisenhower, both JFK and RFK, even as they were both betting Maryland, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Cesar Chavez, Ronald Reagan, and the old man Bush are turning somersaults in their graves as you, Vice Pres, and I'm insulting my wife and her gal pals of the 70s and 80s by referring to you in that terminology should never have been chosen as a running mate, and the senile old man should have bowed out and told the teacher, no, my dear, your governmental bed partner there with our so-called military defense. You know nothing of who the hell is now in our country and walking our damn streets because of your effed up stupidity for the sorriest excuse, Democrat or Republican, this government and its people have ever put into office. And no, I didn't vote for Donald Trump the first time. I don't know if I'll vote for him the next. But I will if he or Mickey Mouse ran against you two the next time. As I was stupid and I voted for the dumbass in office right now. So I'm to blame too for putting his rear in that position. We have made the biggest mistake in voting for this. And to quote what's said to my son every now and then, we opened our mouth and insert foot. We that voted for him get whatever the hell we deserve. But my God help our children for our mistakes. May God bless America, and I hope he calls you all to answer for the shit heap and laughingstock of the world you in Washington, D.C. has caused us, this once great nation, to become. And I will forever stand on my constitutional rights of freedom of speech. God bless Ukraine and Israel. May they fight on and destroy their enemies, every damn one of them, because they damn sight can't count on the people we put in our government or in the United Nations to help them. The DVD ended with a round of standing ovation from those present, and the statement, when asked to respond, from the reporter Laurel Parker, that came from those on the podium when she asked, "Do you have a response?" It was no comment from each who remained there, and they slowly stepped away without a word. But the camera caught the flaming red, infuriated look on several of their faces as they each turned to storm off the set. The camera followed when there were words outside of the studio, and Laura Parker ran with her cameraman through the National Chapel to the door, then panned over to capture the arrest of retired Lieutenant Commander Michael Greystone McMichaels. Chapter 54. Holy crap! and were related to this man? I, for one, am very proud to be allowed to call him and all of them aunties and uncles. How about you? Tootie pushed a strand of dark brown hair tinted with copper behind her ear, where Storm could see the bruise coming up on her cheek from either Phyllis or Thurston W.'s strike that morning. I'll pound the hell out of that bastard I get my hands on him, if I get my hands on him before Graham or one of the uncles or cousins do. He blinked as he tried to settle himself. You okay? She asked. Wow. Yeah, I'm okay. Storm shook his head and looked at Tootie. And Uncle Mac is usually so quiet. He's a case of C4 when it comes to this, Tootie agreed. Storm nodded and stood to remove the DVD and put it in its case and back on the shelf. As he sat down, they looked at the other album. Their last three uncles, Tsar, Rasputin, and Reverend John, were Army. Their late Uncle Jackson, who was a Philadelphia district attorney and kept a private family law office, and was the common law husband of their Aunt Liliana for 31 years before his death, and father to Jackson Jr., a.k.a. Ricky Ratty, Daisy, Alistair Lee, and Montegray. Alistair Lee, who was now home and writing a book on his experience at the Texas border as a retired agent, after he'd given a full report to the House and Senate to make his statement and turn a copy of the video to which now known authorities who were arrested and taken the 5th in their defense of their conviction, to protect whoever gave the orders, who tried to confiscate the tape by breaking into his home, the wrong home, and holding the wrong man at gunpoint until one of them let down their guard, and Dakota, a serviceman of Special Forces himself, took two of them out, and the other four were taken at gunpoint and held by Alice, Bubba, Chase, and Alistair until his men of the New Hope police force could arrive. But the said tape had been mailed by Alistair before they could lay their hands on it. He left them to ponder the statement he gave to the Senate and the House, of which Storm read a copy to Tootie. Until this government understands we have a true crisis at the southern border of Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, this country will remain under siege of unknown terrorists, and every man, woman, and child is at risk by being a victim of a terrorist action, and none of you really give a shit, nor will you until one of your own family members are taken hostage, tortured, murdered before your own eyes. Then you will cry the blues and want to go after everyone that is not of your own religious belief or ancestral background. All you're worried about is when you can get re-elected and how much can you make on your stock portfolios and off of your lobby connections, just like Pennsylvania's own Bontorp. Call on the people when you all take your rose-colored glasses off and are ready to tell the people of these United States just how much shit we're into before we drown in your leadership's actions. And for our own sakes, I hope it's before one of your own daughters or sons are raped and murdered in your own home before your eyes, like so many of the Israeli people bore witness to on October 7th of 2023. Storm passed Tootie what he just read the copy of for her to read for herself. Read this. A few minutes went by. Holy crap. Man, what a speech. He needs to run for office. Storm nodded and passed her the photo album next to him. These are pictures of the Khrushchevs. She took it. Thank you. The Khrushchev brothers had been stationed in West Germany with his grandfather, Phil Pickler, when Reagan demanded that the Berlin Wall be torn down, and were there to celebrate with the German people when it was. There was a piece of the wall on the mantel that they'd sent back to Poppy and Theo, and they'd been there in 1991 when they were chosen with Phil to walk Putin out of the KGB villa and escort him to the airport to put him on the plane and send him back to Russia. That's strange. What is, Tootie? Well, during World War II, there were 5 brothers, the Sullivans. When the war broke out, they all joined the Navy. Wait a sec. She closed her eyes and chewed her thumb. Got it. George, Francis, Joe, Matt, and Al. They died aboard the USS Juno when the ship, it was torpedoed and sunk near the Guadalcanal. Since then, the U.S. military is required to leave a surviving son. They can serve in the same service, but usually they aren't sent out on the same patrol. That's also why there was hell to pay when Pat Tillman was killed in action, because both he and his brother were in the same unit. Only it came to light later he was killed by friendly fire, and our government tried to cover it up because he was a former NFL player. He had left the Arizona Cardinals to join his brother as an Army Ranger after 9/11. They shouldn't have been placed on the same base and in the same platoon. Something isn't right with the Khrushchevs either. It's weird. She looked at their photos. That is interesting. I don't know if any of her other uncles or grandpa has male siblings. They all served. I'll have to find out. He shrugged. I know Grandma Ethel has 7 older brothers, but I don't know if any of them are servicemen. I haven't met any of them as of yet. Reverend Father and their Uncle John had gone through seminary while serving and been an Army chaplain for 20 years. He'd been in New York City when 9/11 happened. He'd been in Manhattan when the planes hit the towers and at a unified religious meeting and saved lives, but also given last rites and played the Kaddish over so many of the dead and dying, and sensing someone nearby that was calling for help, but the voices were of 3 children. Then he started to dig by hand and pulled Slothy and 2 of his classmates out of the rubble to safety. He'd retired as a lieutenant chaplain after being diagnosed with PTS, and now considered himself as unified but unaffiliated. He held the position of in-house religious advisor for the B&B and performed services at the tiny worship center on the property on Friday evenings, Saturday mornings, Sunday service, and Wednesday evenings, Torah and Bible study in the center's attached fellowship hall. He worked alongside of his son, who was versed in Islam, and was known as Chigger. He was the imam for that group of people. Along with them was Rabbi Stephen Topel. The three of them dealt with multiple religions. Chigger with Islam, and who dealt with multiple people in that of those who were Sunni, Shiite Islam, Sufism, Al-Madini, Hanafi, also non-denominational, and were looking for answers. They worked alongside with the young rabbi who had survived the terrorist attack in Israel and had saved several lives himself, in that of the Rabbi Topel, who worked with Orthodox, Hasidic, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructive, Humanics, Rabbinic, Sadducee, Ascend, Haredi, and Boquist sets. They also worked with students who were looking for answers to their own questions for that their own rabbis couldn't or wouldn't or refused to answer. Stephen was nicknamed the Wandering Jew by his younger sister and appreciated the name. Father Uncle John was also trained in the studies of Messianic Jews and carried other interest in learning about other people's religious beliefs. He read, learned, and was quite influential about Buddhism, Rastafari, Hindi, Sikhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Spiritualism, Native American, First Nation, New Age, Shinto, Pagan, and Earth Magic, including that of Wicca, Celtic, and Norse, Judaism, Catholicism, and Episcopalian teachings, and multiple Christian backgrounds, Baptist, Methodist, Seventh-day Adventist, Evangelical, Pentecostal, Lutheran, the Moonies, and even the LDS, or the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons, the Canaanites, Christadelphians, Baha'i Faith, along with the Hare Krishnas, Masons, and Quakers, with the Amish, with the Mennonite, and could give a damn good argument for the evolutionist and the atheist, and still studied other religions and older orders. He was also interested in the Irish mythology and the mythological background of those that came long before the settlement of Ireland. When Storm asked about it, Father John stated, "All are of God. Some have one, others three, and yet again some have many, many more. Others only have a worship of money, and sadly are led astray by it or by that of sex. There are some that have no foundation at all and are cult-related, like Jim Jones and the one and only late crazy as a fox and psychopathic Charles Manson. The main thing is that you have respect for others who have their own beliefs and have a belief yourself. However, you must also be aware that there are those out there that are sardonic and manipulative and twist things that their own belief to get what they and they alone solely want. These that do this are very dangerous, and they prey on the weak of mind and spirit. If you ever have a question or feel unsure or uncomfortable, come to one of us. It doesn't have to be me. Each of Mandula has knowledge of these cults and have asked questions of their elders. Don't hesitate. Ask for help and talk about it. Trust your instincts, please. They won't steer you wrong. If it don't feel right to you, it isn't. He found out that although his father attended AH&H meetings that were held in the center on Tuesday evenings, Graham didn't hold with the higher power thing that they spoke of. He held with what he called a Mandula power, and explained that the power of love, support, understanding, and forgiveness of our Mandula family, because they are made up of a lot of different religious backgrounds, and accepting of all, is what has saved my life and kept me sober since I discovered their strength, and that of which they had bestowed in me. Storm looked at the photo they had in front of them as they sat side by side. Graham's college graduation picture. He was holding Storm. Jim and Beth Anna had their 3 kids, J.C., Cardina, and Constance. Two were older than him, and Connie was a baby in her mother's arms. Christina stood with her 2, Pearl and Devon, in front of the large Ugandan-American man, his uncle Labu Sanjay. He had an arm around Christina's waist, and his other arm crossed with Jim's over Graham's shoulder, while Christina and his daughters, twins, Bo and Kata, were in the arms of their grandparents, Chris and Ethel. And Ranella stood with them alongside of Theo and Poppy within the mix. Storm knew Graham graduated a year late at 19 from Pensbury, but he didn't know until his Aunt Chrissy informed him before she left for the auto shop with Silver that he'd been taking college courses his 2 years at Pensbury and continued with them the summer and through night school, and that's when he was working at the Rasmore. So his scholarship was awarded early, and that he graduated Princeton when he was just 20 with a double master's degree in business management and hospitality and a second double bachelor's degree in anthropology and archaeology. That explained the Neanderthal comment and the Lucy one, as well as his historical research and repair of the inn. He also still took night classes in the history of the American craft of woodworking and furniture repair and restoration. Looking at the photo and the many others of his dad, he could now see himself in the younger photos of Graham. Tootie visibly resembled Ranella, with her deep ash brown and copper highlights and green eyes. Even her petite build, yet athleticism that she carried. Tootie told him she ran track and field in high school, and she ran a few marathons. She was hoping to maybe do the Boston and New York. She ran the Philadelphia last year when she was 18. RCC had the dark, rich mahogany with highlighted coffee highlights that had been kissed by the sun, and her eyes, though, were a beautiful dark dough brown, even behind her thick lenses. Buddy had golden and silver blonde hair and sparkling crystal blue eyes, made larger by as he looked through his own bifocals that he wore with the round dark frames that made him resemble a blonde version of Harry Potter. He looked up as Emily entered. "You ready? You have a special appointment on this, and the turkeys are in, and Grandpa has all the trimmings. Tootie, sweetie, your grandpa, he's waiting on you to help with the pies. He pulled the ingredients of the one you're talking about from Kristen's friends on YouTube." "He did? Oh, wow, thank you. I'm there. I'm on it." She hugged Storm as she stood. "Thank you for accepting me, RCC, and Buddy as your cuz." Then she hugged Emily and left the room. "They'll settle. Those bastards. Your Gran has just got off the phone to make more appointments with the doctors at Children's Hospital and St. Christopher's in Philly for RCC and Buddy, with Dr. Rasha's assistance." Can you hear Buddy clicking away as he's back on the computer? And she's enjoying old cartoons with her new teddy bear with Baka and Hajda in your grandparents' suite with a big bowl of popcorn and unsweetened iced tea. Storm looked up at her and shook his head. "I know, and there's something. There's something about all three of them, Mom. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something there. They're all different than Reed, and none of them actually look like Phyllis." Chapter 55. Emily stepped over to start to put away the albums. She looked at Storm. "What's wrong?" "Their mother is as bad as mine was. I know Mandula will get them through this. It's good Auntie Twinkle will be here to help. And Grandma and Ursula. She actually has a degree in child development, child counseling, and child daycare. Wow. And yeah, Mom, I'm ready." He set aside the first photo album to stand. "Without everyone being here, the quiet is deafening." He shook his head. "I know. Everyone will be gathered back here tonight. We have one stop before we leave." She looked at her watch. "It's almost 8:30. Appointment is at 9. Come on." He followed her. Still a little shaken from everything this morning of Thanksgiving had brought, he walked down the hall. "It will be okay," she reassured when she knocked on the door. "Come in." Emily turned the knob to open Graham's office door for them to step in. Storm closed his eyes and inhaled the well-remembered step. And there on the shelf was Murph, his brown and tan teddy bear. "We want to know if you want to come to your son's doctor's appointment with Doc Azart." Graham blinked and looked at Ethel, who smiled. "Those supply orders can wait until you get back. Go. Besides, it's Thanksgiving. We shouldn't be working anyway." Graham rose to hand her a very tiny, white-faced, silver-eyed, gray, fluffy kitten with a red tuft on its head and its nursing bottle. He reached for his suit jacket. "You don't need that. But grab your leather trench on the way out. It's still very cold." "Yes, Mom." He came around the desk. His shirt was different from the one he wore 2 hours ago. So were the pants. They were jeans, not dress slacks. Graham now wore the jeans, and he had a pair of sneakers instead of his dress shoes. The sleeves were folded back to just below the elbow to show muscular forearms and a rose and name tattoo, one on either forearm. The front of the button-down was open at the collar to the third button because the top two buttons were missing, revealing several thick purple scars through the light dusting of hair and a glimpse of the other tattoo Storm hadn't noticed fully earlier that morning, which showed through the thinned, well-worn, threadbare and button-down. But he couldn't make out what it was on the left side of Graham's chest. "Thank you." He bent to kiss Ethel on her cheek, then came through the door. "Thank you, Aunt Em." She smiled. "No need. He's yours. You are Dad." "One of his dads. Uncle Silver still has the right, as do you, as his mom." He looked at Storm. "Yeah, I'm Dad. But I was accepted as a big brother before that, and I'll take whatever I can get. And thank you for letting Tootie, RCC, and Buddy call me Uncle." Storm put his arm around him. "Dad, have you noticed there's something different about them three?" Like what?" "Well," Graham wrapped his arms around him in a hug. "Tootie. She's got Grandmom's dark brown hair, not as dark as what I've known it to be. And RCC, well, she resembles Aunt Ranella as well. But then there's Buddy. And yet, Dad, none of them carry any traits of Phyllis." "Well, we'll see what we see. We'll see about, testing and making sure, but whatever it is, doesn't matter to us. They've got a home here." "Yeah, they deserve better than what they got stuck with, and my dad is the best. Mom, Dad, let's do this and see about getting my feet fixed." Storm let go to walk down the hall with his head held high for the first time since he'd arrived home. "See, you did that," Emily whispered to Graham, who took a deep breath and nodded. "And you'll do it for Buddy, RCC, Tootie, and her baby, too. And yeah, Storm's right. There's nothing of Phyllis in there. But also, I can see Ranella, but not Reed or George." With their coats on, they followed to leave the building and walked to Emily's newer VW Bug that was still 20 years old and still carried the roof rack welded on top. What do you think, as we end this today, is up? What has Storm actually noticed with Phyllis Berkshire's 3 children? Are they Reed's? Or are they someone else's? What has she done as she's not married, and yet she's expecting another child? Tootie says, through IVF. More secrets to come as we discover the truth behind things that Mandula may not even know. If you enjoyed this, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell to have notice when we come back. Thank you and have a good day.